Welcome to Season 2 of Moving with CHD, the podcast and blog where I talk to fellow CHDers about being active with a congenital heart defect. For those new listeners, I'm Hayley and I was born with atrial ventricular septal defect and had 2 open heart surgeries by the age of 1. I've always loved being active, but growing up I wanted to meet others to get a better understanding of the benefits and limitations faced when exercising with a heart defect. Over these next 6 episodes, we'll share a whole range of incredible stories and the realities of moving with CHD. However active you're able to be, I hope you find some inspiration, encouragement, and the movement you love. Hi, Valentina. Thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast, Moving with CHD.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here. It really means a lot.
That's great. I've been so excited for this conversation, and we'll really get into what we're going to be talking about in a bit, but for all our listeners, I think this is an area that, we're both super passionate about. Before we get into that, I think, as I normally kick off, if you could share with all our listeners a little bit about you and maybe a little bit about your CHD as well.
Okay, sure. Hi, I'm Valentina. I'm 27, from Northern California. I'm half Mexican. And my CHD, I'm under the umbrella of single ventricles. I have double inlet left ventricle and double outlet right ventricle, as well as a VSD, L transposition, pulmonary stenosis. And I also have this very rare one that's called, the technical term is the upstairs downstairs heart, which means it is completely horizontal.
Wow, amazing. That's quite a list.
Yes.
So I guess you're growing up with all that sort of going on. What was the impact on you?
Well, I was really lucky that, after my third surgery, which was when I was about 2.5, I actually I was pretty good. I haven't had another surgery or intervention or procedure really since. But what was kind of different was that I would get sick a lot. And when I got sick, it would really impact me. I have a whole thing that when I get a cold, it can turn into asthma, it can turn into bronchitis, it can turn into pneumonia. It's happened a few times. But not all the time. And then also I get more tired when I do physical activities. I think a lot of people listening who have the Fontan can understand the way the circulation works. It's, it's just harder to do things like run and go up a hill and that kind of thing. And growing up with a CHD, it was, I had a pretty normal childhood. But I did feel really different a lot of the time. And I mean that not in a narcissistic way, in a lonely way, because I didn't know anyone else who had a CHD. And, it was just kind of hard to fit in sometimes, especially in PE classes, and having a very active family. While that was really great because I had a lot of opportunities to be active, it was also kind of hard because it was I couldn't always keep up, or felt like I was holding them back when we would go on a hike together, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that with the PE. I feel you don't really have that community, do you, as a kid when you're growing up? And I think I've said this probably before on my Instagram, but kids are so unfiltered. So when you're in a PE class, they just point, right? And they're like, what's that?
Yeah.
Adults are a bit more, maybe not in a good way, but adults don't tend to ask so much.
Yeah. And then it's hard too if I totally understand that kids are unfiltered and they're curious about the world, but it's hard when you're a kid too, and maybe there's a bit of bullying around scars and about how you run and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that's really difficult. So I guess picking up on that a little bit, so digging into the aspects of that. So did that really increase your consciousness and awareness of sort of your heart condition, and I guess body image as well comes into that?
Yeah, definitely. I think that It took a while for me to really like accept my scars. Like I would always just kind of like tolerate them. It really, a really big moment that sort of turned it around for me was when I was a freshman in college, my roommate freshman year. My good friend Tori, she said something really interesting. Like I think my scar had come up, and she said something like, "Oh, your scar is really cool. It's really badass. It's better than any tattoo you could ever get because it shows that like you're strong and then that you survived." And I was just kind of like, "Whoa." Because I'd never really like thought of it that way.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, yeah, it's great to have that outside perspective on that as well, and for someone else to say that, it gives you so much confidence as well.
Yeah, totally. And now I'm like proud of it. I like wearing like low cut things so everyone can see it. Yeah.
Amazing. So I guess these, it can take a while to get to that point with scars. I mean, I certainly know growing up that I don't think I really noticed it that much as a kid growing up, but I sort of became far more aware of it as a teenager. So, I know it can take quite a while to get to the point where you do sort of accept it. And that takes us into the area that, we're both super passionate about. And that's around the sort of body positivity piece, and of course body image, and that plays a massive role and something that can be quite challenging for people who have CHD. So to start with, before we really get into it, maybe if you could share with me a little bit about what body positivity is and what that means to you.
Okay. That's a great question. So body positivity in its essence is a social movement. And like any social movement, it's very nuanced. There are many different ideas. And, it's not a monolith. Like you can find body positivity stuff that in all sorts of different ways. But kind of the overarching idea is this idea that that humans come in all different types of bodies, and that all are good and all are valid, and everyone deserves to love their body no matter what. And the body positivity that I sort of learned and really follow is it comes from this nonprofit organization that I worked with for many years that's called The Body Positive. And the idea is really about figuring out where the challenges are to having the best possible relationships with our bodies and trying to get through those, and about coming to it from like a place of love.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's something that's, can be incredibly powerful, because once you sort of come to that place where you accept the body and you coming at it with a place of love, that's, incredibly powerful for confidence and just self-esteem as well, and how you come across, I think. It's an area that I guess want to deep dive in, because of course with congenital heart defects often comes scars, there often comes fatigue and energy levels, and all those things can sort of don't really contribute so well to body positivity and feeling great about yourself. So let's start with maybe defining what some of those core principles are.
So for the nonprofit that I worked for, specifically the Body Positive, they have these 5 core competencies. And those 5 are reclaim health, practice intuitive self-care, cultivate self-love, declare your own authentic beauty, and build community. And then also with that comes, so often with body positivity, we're really like often talking about like weight and body size. And like, that's a really important thing. And like, CHD, like, and scars, that's a part of body positivity too, that we can use, this idea of like feeling good about our scars and feeling good about like our bodies when we do feel things like fatigue or, being like unwell, not feeling well. But also like an important part of it is the body size aspect. And in there we have this core principle it's called health at every size. The acronym is HAES, HAES. The idea behind health at every size is that, you can be healthy no matter what size you are. There's this like idea in our culture that we need to be thin in order to be healthy, or need to be a certain size in order to be healthy. And a lot of people are just like pressured to lose weight. And this is like a big problem in the medical industry, because what happens is like a lot of people in larger bodies like experience a lot of discrimination, or doctors like won't run tests on them because they'll just be like, oh no, you just need to lose weight. That's your problem. And so the idea is that no matter what size you are, you can like have healthy practices and sort of live this healthy life. I had a really interesting experience once. I was at an appointment with my cardiologist, a medical student who was following her around for the day and learning from her, and a hepatologist. And this was like the first time they'd really told me about like my Fontan liver. And the hepatologist like was explaining to me like, okay, so like think of a cheeseburger, like there's a lot of meat and a lot of cheese and a lot of bread and just a little bit of vegetables. You want to switch it around. And just like all of these strategies for how to take care of my liver better. And then he says, I'm not going to tell you to lose weight, because losing weight won't necessarily help your liver. There are a lot of larger people who have very healthy livers, and there are a lot of thinner people who have a lot of trouble with their livers. And I was like, have you ever heard of health at every size? And he said, no. And then the young doctor who was in the room said, I have. And I think there's two important things that I learned in this moment. And that is that there are a lot of doctors who understand intuitively that weight does not equal health. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio. And also that maybe there's a younger generation of doctors who is open to these ideas, especially as like more research comes out. Another big core principle is the idea of intuitive eating. It's about like letting like your body and like your body wisdom sort of like guide you in what you want to eat. And there's a lot of nuance to it too, because like, for example, I have to eat low sodium because of my heart condition. So then it's like, how do I eat intuitively and limit my sodium in a way that doesn't turn into like food obsession? Because like that's the thing that happens a lot with dieting, is like the reason why it doesn't really work, or the reason why people end up overeating, is because when you restrict yourself, that's like the body's natural response. Another aspect of body positivity too is sort of acknowledging the real barriers that exist between people and having that perfect self-care, because we can't really talk about like intuitive eating and, figuring out how to eat in a way that best supports your health without acknowledging that some people don't have access to a lot of foods or live in food deserts. And I think that this is a really important thing to think about in terms of like body positivity and CHD, because we get all of these messages from the world that say, this is what is healthy, this is what is not, this is good, this is bad. And it doesn't always line up with what we need to do with our bodies. So like, for example, a lot of diet food is really high in sodium. Or like another thing is, do you remember the whole kale fad?
Yes, and juicing as well, like juicing your kale.
Yes. If you're on Coumadin, the blood thinner, like you have to be really careful with kale because of the vitamin K.
Wow, really?
Yes. So, that's really complicated to like be in this world that says like, hey, you should be eating kale because it's good for you. But actually you in particular, it doesn't really work. So going back to the core competencies from the body positive, the whole piece about practice intuitive self-care, for me, in terms of CHD, what that really means is that we need to like tailor make how we do our own self-care. But anyway, how I got into this. So I was like really ready to hear about body positivity at that point in my life when I was in college, because at that point I had like tried a couple of diets and I'd kind of been like, oh, I want to lose 15 pounds for like many years. And my friend Tori, the same one who said nice things about my scar, was like, no, I don't think you should do that. I don't think that would be very healthy. And I was like, whoa. Right. Because that was like, because, it was so normalized for me to just like casually talk about like dieting and like losing weight. But then a few years later, after I'd graduated from college, just kind of by a coincidence, I was working around the corner from the office of the Body Positive. And I sort of met the people who worked there. And I ended up volunteering once a week. And then I just like totally was like immersed in this world. And I went to their facilitator workshop and I learned like so much, and I read the book, and it just like totally changed everything.
Yeah, amazing. And of those principles you mentioned, is there one that really stands out to you? Like,
I mean, they all do, don't they? I think practice intuitive self-care, that one is like really, really important for me, just because of what I said. Like, you get messages from the world that say, you need to do this is what's healthy, but it doesn't always line up. And then also I think build community is a really big one. Because for me, like the moment when I was like most able to like fully accept my CHD and fully able to like take care of myself in the ways I needed to was when I found the CHD community. And that didn't happen until I was like 25. And at that moment I was like, oh my God, I get it. I need a floss and like that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think, both you and I have relatively recently been on Instagram sharing our sort of CHD side. And for me, that community has been incredible. I think I joined May in 2020 and I just had no idea sort of how many people were sharing their stories and all the differences as well with CHD. I mean, obviously you've got quite a complex one and quite a list, and it's amazing how open people are to sharing. And like you, it's people are normalizing scars as well. That's something that I've really noticed.
Yes, that actually is, I like that. It's amazing. I love it. I think that one fits into the declare your own authentic beauty, right? Yeah, the scar positivity. It's amazing. I love it.
So digging a little bit more into low sodium, how have you made that work for you?
So it was a hard adjustment at first, for sure. But for me, the biggest thing was really just like letting my taste buds adjust to like eating less sodium. Because if you think about it, like the way that our taste buds sort of like work around like salt and sodium is that the more we eat it, the more we kind of like need it in order to like enjoy the flavor. So for me, the first part was really just like cutting down on the salt until all of a sudden all of these things that before without salt felt flavorless now like had really interesting complex flavors that weren't like based on salt. There's a lot of strategies that I use in order to try to like get less sodium in my food, because it can be really hard because the food that is available to us just has a lot of sodium a lot of the time. I love like a good like Asian soup. And so I've found ways to sort of make it at home in a way that has less sodium. So like using coconut aminos instead of soy sauce. Acid is your friend. Like if you put a lot of vinegar and stuff, if you're low sodium. The biggest thing is being able to cook things yourself. And I know that's like really hard because a lot of people don't like to cook. And I don't know, my advice for that is like find a way to make it enjoyable if you can. One pan recipes, those are your friend. Fast and easy. No, but really like listen to a podcast, listen to an audiobook, listen to music, get people in your house to cook with you if there are people in your house. I don't know, treat it like an art project. That's always a fun one. And sort of like experiment with like colors and textures and like make it a whole experience. Also, you can always make more and save it for later. That's a good strategy. And then like another thing I've done too is sort of like made staples and frozen them. And so if I'm ever just really hungry and need something, it's there. And we are getting more and more good low sodium pre-prepared options. So it's good to like know which ones you like. But also with low sodium, I want to say like, I know that there are people who maybe like have single ventricles or LaFontaine or something similar, and they don't eat low sodium. And like, seriously, like that's totally fine. But I do want to encourage you that like, if you're patient with your taste buds, like they will adjust eventually, even if it feels like it's been like 2 months and your food is flavorless, like it'll happen.
I read that the other day, actually, that it can take a couple of weeks, and if you reduce your salt, then it will taste flavourless initially, but after a couple of weeks, you suddenly start to, adjust to that. Amazing, isn't it?
It is. It's really cool.
And with low sodium, so one of the challenges I can foresee our listeners may be thinking about is what your strategy is for when you go to a restaurant.
Oh my God. Okay. This is a good one. So it depends what restaurant I'm going to. If it's one of those like big box restaurants that you can find the menu online, like the nutrition information, like do that. Definitely. And then if not, like there's little ways that you can like reduce the sodium. And for me, like sometimes I feel like it's okay if I want to have like a slightly more salty meal, like if it's like a special occasion, or like if I just feel like it every once in a while, like I think it's okay. And any way I can reduce the salt is good. So like I've called ahead and said like, hey, I really want to eat there, but I eat low sodium. Like, is like, do you have a recommendation of something on the menu that has less sodium? Or even if I'm there, I'll ask that question. Or I'll say like, is there any way you can make this less salty? So like if it's a soup, you can ask them to water down the broth. If it's a salad, you can ask for the dressing on the side and ask for like oil and vinegar, which is a lot less salty. If it is something like fries, you can ask for it, or chips, you can ask for it without the salt. Absolutely. And oftentimes I'll just say like, no added salt, or I'll say like, can I get the olives on the side? That kind of thing. It's hard. You can't really totally count it.
Oh, it all helps though, doesn't it? Being able to reduce it a little bit if you can.
Yes. Yeah, no, it is good. Like, thanks for asking this question, because I feel like we can't really totally have a conversation about like fitness and like bodies and that kind of thing without really like addressing how we eat.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, one of the things that we sort of, I guess we talked about before is for the CHD community who may have symptoms of CHD, whether that's fatigue or whether that's as well having scars from surgery, feeling great about your body 100% of the time, it can feel not that achievable. So I guess how could the CHD community start to move towards embracing these principles?
Good question. I think that, I think the most important thing to remember is that it won't like fix everything overnight. It's not like a light switch and suddenly you get it and everything is perfect and you reach nirvana. It's just like, it's a process. It is a journey. I think there's kind of two aspects to this. It's sort of like the individual journey and then also like the collective journey. Also like within the community, like what we can do is like have a lot of like solidarity with each other and sort of like be there for each other, sort of make space for those who experience more challenges in this area, those who have like more like intersectional, like marginalized identities, like making the community really welcoming to those who really need it, without judgment and with a lot of compassion. I think that's a good start. I'm sure there's more.
I found as well, we talked about diet culture, but being aware of when you're being negative to your body. Like I hear quite a lot of people saying that if you wouldn't say it to your friend, then you shouldn't be saying it to yourself. So you always have to treat it like you're your own friend as well.
Yes.
And I think we're all like our own harshest critics. So sort of checking yourself when you hear yourself saying, "Oh, I need to do some exercise today because I had a burger last night," or whatever it is, and really sort of being aware of that going through your head.
Yes. And like figuring out like where those thoughts are coming from and like who told you that you needed to do that, and sort of examining that and really like, coming from a place of love. So that's really important. I think also there are like little things that we could all do to make like CHD spaces more body positive. Like sometimes I'm really concerned when I see people post like before and after pictures. because like I learned that can actually like really trigger people who have eating disorders. Also, like a lot of diet talk isn't the best always. Um, and then like there are a lot of places where like people are already doing really amazing things. Like I'm part of like some Facebook groups where people make a lot of like goals around like food and exercise that aren't weight based, and it's really awesome. And people like post pictures of their beautiful salads, and then I'm like, ooh, I want to make a salad with kiwis on it. And it's a good like intuitive eating like inspiration thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So for you then, since sort of discovering this and sort of starting and going on this journey, what's sort of changed for you in terms of how you feel about your body image and how you sort of perceive yourself?
That's a good question. I think like before, like my scars, like my body, I kind of just like tolerated a lot of it. And I think in terms of like my health specifically, I kind of had this sort of like combative relationship with my body. Like looking back, like I can totally remember times where I've said things like, my body hates me and like my liver is stupid and like that's awful, you know? And I think that, you know, coming from this place of love and like compassion has like made a really, really big difference, because like now, like instead of feeling like my body hates me, I'm like, oh, it's doing the best it can. Like that's cool that it's managed to do this much, but it's totally okay that like now I'm having trouble now. And like that can be really hard too. Because sometimes it feels like, especially with CHD, like sometimes it feels like you can do everything right and your body just like keeps doing weird things. Like for a while, I felt like I was doing everything right. I was like eating lots of vegetables and going on lots of walks and all of this. And then I went for my liver MRI and they were like, well, your liver isn't doing too good. And I was like, oh no, how did that happen? And just like recognizing that that's like not my fault. You know, it's not my fault that like my body is the way it is in any way. It's not anyone's fault. And I think it's a lot of like nonviolent communication stuff. Like, as you say, like anything you wouldn't say to your friend, you wouldn't say to yourself. You know, it's like your body is like the first relationship that you have. Like your first relationship is the one with yourself. And sort of finding peace in that like makes it a lot easier to sort of like weather the storm, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, and you touched on there, it's sort of, you know, before your liver MRI, you're going for walks and doing everything right. I guess I want to touch on that a little bit on the sort of the walking side. And because, you know, in terms of movement, that comes into body positivity as well. Sort of how has that worked for you, and how did you sort of find your movement?
Yes. So, especially when I was a kid, and also when I was just like a bit younger, again, just like the food, you get a lot of messages from the world that say, this is what you have to do to be healthy. And this is the way you're supposed to do it. And it was really hard for me because a lot of those I just couldn't do. Like I can't really run. Like I can sprint a little bit, you know, a few yards. And there was a time where like I tried really hard to actually be able to run with like intervals on the treadmill. And the most I was ever able to run was about a minute and a half. And then I was like, wow, I'm bored. I want to walk instead. And I think for me, like a really big part is like not comparing myself to other people. And especially like people who don't have CHD. So like, for example, I think I mentioned before that I have like a very active family. My mom was a volleyball star. My sister was on every sports team ever. There is a mountain that way, about 2 blocks away. It is 1,058 feet up. That's about 322 meters. My dad climbs it on a regular day after work. And I have never been to the top. And that's okay. I don't have to go to the top if I don't want to. Yeah. And I just like remember that, I just remember that I don't have to do what other people do. I can do what I need to do. When I was a kid, I had a lot of trouble with like PE classes, like in elementary school. I remember there was this one specific PE teacher. I must have been like 8 years old. And she had us run to the trees and back. And the trees were far. This was like a big schoolyard. And she said if she saw anyone walking, we would all have to do it again.
Wow.
And I can't really run. And even less so then. And she made the whole class do it like 3 times. And I felt like it was my fault. I don't know if it was my fault, but I felt like it was my fault. But it was like this weird thing where like, I couldn't talk to her privately during this. I couldn't like get to her. I like didn't know how to like broach the subject because I was 8.
Yeah. Wow.
And then I was like shaky for the rest of the day and it was awful. And I told my dad, and my dad like went to the school and like talked to her. She was like, nobody told me. But anyway, there were a lot of experiences like this in PE where it was like we were expected to do really strenuous things that I just simply couldn't do. Mm-hmm. So then, like in middle school, that's when like our PE classes start to get more structured here. I just said, like, I don't want to be in PE. I don't want to be there. I used to walk by when I was in 5th grade when middle schoolers were in PE and they were like getting yelled at and they were like sprinting. And I was just like, I can't do that. No. Yeah. So I got out of PE for middle school. And then for high school, I tried to get out of PE and the school said, no, you can't. It's a state requirement. Okay. So my parents went to the state and said, please excuse her from PE. And they did. So then I got to take extra art classes, which was awesome. But the one downside to this was that then I didn't really have any sort of like foundation in like exercise that worked for me, or at least like not much. And I just sort of had adopted this idea that like, oh, exercise, that's not really my thing. That's not really like for me. I can't really do that. And I really had this perception because that is what I had always seen. I had always seen like, this is what exercise is. And I felt like, no, I can't do that. But nobody had ever made it more accessible for me, which I think would have made a big difference. And I noticed that like my friends and like my sister who had been on sports teams as kids, I wasn't allowed on sports teams. Like even then, like in college or like beyond, they just like knew what to do when they went to a gym. I was like, how do you know what to do? So anyway, I saw my current cardiologist, my adult congenital cardiologist. I met her when I was like 18. And she said, what exercise are you doing? And I said, oh, I do yoga sometimes. Cause like, you know, I like easy yoga. And she was like, oh, do you do anything that gets your heart rate up? Any cardio, anything else? And I was like, you know, it's not really my thing. I can't really like do that. Yeah. And she was like, all you have to do is walk. And that was just so liberating because nobody had ever really like told me that like, no, you don't have to like kill yourself to actually get a benefit from exercise. Yeah. And then I really got into the whole concept of the solo walk. It was like, I'm just going to walk by myself and nobody can tell me to walk faster. And I can like listen to my podcasts, listen to music and like be in nature. And it's awesome. And that is actually still my preferred form of exercise. Sometimes people can come with me if they respect my pace. Yeah. But that's still what I do. And like, pretty much every afternoon right before sunset, I go on a walk.
Amazing. I mean, that's so, I mean, you know, those sort of early years you were talking about, those experiences you had has sort of formed then how you respond to sort of being active for the whole of your sort of childhood, really, those sort of more negative experiences, which is so, it's sort of sad to see that, you know, it wasn't sort of brought up earlier and being, I guess, like you said, more accessible and a bit more understanding as to what exercise being active means.
Yes. And I think there were times when I think my parents did a good job of like finding like a way for me to exercise in a way that was like accessible and like good for me. Like we would go to the pool a lot, or like we'd go on like some nature bike rides and stuff. And like that was fun. But I think as I got older, then I started to feel like I was holding everyone back. And then also like as I got older, I didn't really want to go to the pool with my parents as much anymore. Yeah. And then, yeah, I guess the social pressures get bigger as you get further into adolescence. And I responded by kind of like pulling away from exercise and being like, no, I'm not comfortable in this area.
But it's so good that you found that now. And I like when you were saying about people can come with a walk if they respect your pace. I like that.
Thanks. Yeah, it works out pretty well for me. And like, I try to challenge myself with hills, but like hills are still really, really hard.
I think hills are hard for everyone.
Yeah.
So if people want to go out and find out a little bit more information about body positivity, what sort of resources could you recommend they look up?
So the first one is I definitely recommend looking up The Body Positive, the nonprofit organization that I worked for many years. They have a book, they have online courses, they have in-person courses when it's not a pandemic, if you're interested in that. Another resource that I absolutely love, it's by Sonia Renee Taylor, The Body is Not an Apology. And she talks about radical self-love. And she started out as a slam poet, so it is an excellent read. And then for any men who are listening or any like male aligned people, there's this really great article from Medium that's called, or actually I forget what it's called, but his name is Matt McGorry, MattMcGorry. And it's very well researched. And then intuitive eating is a good one. And if you are interested in specifically like learning about like anti-fat bias and like debunking like a lot of like diet culture fads and like that kind of thing, there's a podcast called Maintenance Phase. And that one it's very good. It's very well researched. It's 2 journalists who do it. Also highly recommended.
So I guess from your experience and knowledge, then what's sort of one small step that somebody could take today to start reframing how they feel about their body and their body image?
I think probably the first and most important thing is to be kind to yourself. In whatever way you need. I think I've heard that a lot of people, when they first hear about body positivity, they like feel bad that they don't love their bodies. And like, you don't need to feel bad for not loving your body yet. And you don't need to beat yourself up for anything. That the first step to having a peaceful relationship with your own body is just being kind to yourself.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's sort of a great way to wrap up our episode for today. Be kind to yourself. I love it. Thanks so much for joining us on the podcast, Valentina.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you've not already, please help us get the word out to fellow CHDers by sharing with your network, subscribing to the YouTube channel or podcast series, and leaving your feedback in the comments. You can also stay up to date on all the latest episodes on my Instagram @Hayley.HeartFitness.